This is the Art for Everyone podcast, where you got one guy that's on a art journey, another person that's been in the art journey for a long time, and his art friends come on here, educate, learn, and grow.
Yeah, so welcome everybody, and I want to say first before we get started, if we have any static today, we've been having some kind of technical issues that we're not used to, but we're going to try to do our best to kind of work through it. And today I'm really excited about our guest because we're going to talk about art shows and how to exhibit your work, opportunities for artists, and he brings a lot to the table, does a lot for the community. I want to introduce Sophocles. Now, Sophocles, give us your full name and tell us who you are, what you do, because I don't want to butcher your name.
No problem. My full name is Sophocles Plokamakis. And what I do is, as an artist, I'm an illustrator and a manga artist. I make like Japanese style inspired comics, and I want to get into doing children's book illustration and writing for that too. And I also help artists from around the world exhibit and sell their art and make networking connections with other people like gallerists, artists, creatives, and other art people in the art community in NYC galleries in New York City.
Yeah, and that's what kind of caught my attention. And you mentioned all over the world, and you're currently in Brazil, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I'm living here at the moment, and it's in a place called Balneario Camboriú, and it's a very awesome beach city. I live 7-minute walk from the beach, so whenever I feel like it, I can go and like rest my head and just relax and kind of vibe with the waves and walk barefooted. It's very nice here, so I'm not complaining.
Where were you born?
I was born in New York City, actually. I'm a New Yorker, but my parents came from Greece, so I'm a first generation New Yorker.
What Sophocles is that? I mean, because you hear Achilles and all kind of ones right from all the movies. Is it like a meaning behind it? Is it like some kind of god or?
I get that all the time. Is that the name of a Greek god or something?
Yeah.
Sophocles, the word sopho or sophos in Greek means wise or wise man. And Sophocles was an ancient Greek playwright in around, I believe it was like 450 BC or so. And he wrote the most amount of plays in that time, and he won the most amount of awards. He was the #1 like award winner. He's written plays like Oedipus, the Oedipus Colonist, Oedipus Rex, Antigone, and many other plays. Only 7 of them have survived. So, unfortunately, but I think he wrote over 250 plays, and he was also a Greek general in Athens and a philosopher. So he was, there was no distraction, not as many distractions back in the day. So, more prolificity, if that's even a word, being prolific.
So is it, are you disappointed that you're only an artist and not a general?
Well, I mean, I wear many hats in the art world. So my world revolves around art and things that relate to art, but I'm not just an artist. I'm also a curator of art shows. So that's how I help artists get into New York City galleries in a fairly simple way. I mean, there are some guidelines to like artists that my wife and I, she's my partner in my business, start shows, accept artists into the gallery. There's some guidelines, some things that we won't show in art, but it's mostly like pretty straightforward, and there's not many restrictions. It's just like stuff if it's like content that's a little too graphic, whether it's language or what's being shown or like hate speech or anything like that. But other than that, I like to let everyone show as long as they pass certain requirements, because they can have a chance to expand their art knowledge and expand their networks and learn from the other artists in the show. I've had many artists, including myself, learn things from artists that they see or be inspired by the other artists in the show, and it goes to change their entire way of making art. Like, for example, for the backdrop for this show, you see one of the covers of my Farm Boy comics, and before Farm Boy was in full color, I made it in the School of Visual Arts in New York City. It's one of the most prestigious comic art schools, and they have a full arts program. It's not just comic art. But it was a black and white comic. I made 2 chapters of it, and then I didn't touch it for like over 10 years. I was always like drawing the characters or like doodling or like coming up with ideas, but I didn't really like expand on past the second chapter. And then after the pandemic hit, I couldn't go in the subway and draw for a while because I have a subway art series as well, where I draw like things that inspire me in the subways in the world. And I've done that in like New York, I've done that in Japan, Brazil, different states in the US and in London. But I couldn't do that because of the pandemic. You know, it was not smart to go into the subways at that time. So I needed some sort of art outlet to like help me get through that time. And I couldn't do shows at that time either, at least for several months, because everything was shut down. So I was like, why don't you go back to your old comic? You know, you see all these colorful paintings and photography and sculptures and mixed media art and beautiful art in the gallery shows that you do. Why don't you fully color it, Farm Boy? Why don't you rewrite the story? Why don't you redraw it in a new vision now that you have more skills as an artist and you're better? Because it was the first comic I made in the School of Visual Arts in my sophomore year. So my art was a little more amateur back then. And then I had more time to grow. And then, you know, all the artists that I had given opportunities to like blessed me with their inspiration. And I made this new comic out of it.
Well, and you, just like the philosopher, you have opened up the dialogue of culture and providing opportunities for other artists. So as somebody that does this and has done it for a long time, I know what it's like to focus on your own career, but I also know what a big undertaking it is to open up the doors for other artists. And like, that's a big thing that you do. It's a lot of work to create these opportunities. And New York is an art mecca. And I can only imagine during the pandemic. I mean, Vinnie and I live in San Diego. And when things were shut down here, it was just a very different life. But I can only imagine in New York, where those galleries are used to so much traffic and the artists are used to visibility, and to not have that for a period of time.
That's very true. And one thing that happened in that time period is that several artists that I know took to the streets. There's an artist I know who's very notable. His name is Calicho. I was his friend before he started like his road of being a professional artist. I met him at a dance class, like a Bollywood dance class in New York City. And I met another friend there too. But I'll talk about Calicho. He has been featured by the New York Times on their Instagram and on an article. And he started painting murals on the boarded up windows of storefronts in New York City and Manhattan. And that's one way that artists took to the streets to express themselves, because they couldn't really show in galleries. So they painted on those wooden boards. And, it was illegal. I have no idea. I didn't do it, but they did it. And a lot of them were featured in like press, because it was something that was like a phenomenon at the time. Like our artists were just painting and they were tagging and they were making beautiful murals. And he was one of them. So I have a lot of respect for Calicho, and I loved some of the stuff I saw during that time period. And another thing that happened during that time period was there was the, what was it called again? It was called, I'm forgetting right now. It was like a movement where artists, by my friend Billy Tsapalas, he's also Greek. He was creating opportunity for artists and restaurants to work together, because restaurants in New York are having a big problem during that time. They couldn't seat anyone, but they had like delivery, no contact delivery, and the restaurants had outdoor seating. So I was one of the artists, along with several other artists that have done start shows and other artists in general, that painted the outdoor seating wooden structures during that time period to help the restaurants attract attention and have more business. And I didn't get paid for the one that I did, but they fed me every single time I was there. I had like 2 meals. And, my art got to be in my neighborhood of Astoria when I was living in New York, which was really cool. One part of the mural is still there, which is really awesome. And it's many years later now. That was like, I think 3 years ago. I forget the exact amount of time. But it was called Curbside Canvas. That's what it was called. Now I'm remembering it. And it was a really awesome thing that Billy was doing and helping out the neighborhood restaurants. He came from a restaurant background with his family. So that's something that happened during the pandemic.
And you touched on something really important there, in that sometimes artists don't always have an abundance of opportunities, or sometimes the opportunities may be taken away from us. And in these difficult periods like the pandemic, the artists are left with the opportunity of being able to create something from the challenges, or being able to find the creative solution to continue doing what they do. And that is to make stuff, to share with the world, to put beauty in a world where it may be lacking or seeming to be lacking at times.
That's for sure. You know, it was funny because one of the quotes, one of the shows we did during the height of the pandemic, not the height, but like, not when it first happened, because we had to cancel a show when it first happened, because we had a show coming up called New York Stories 2, and we had to cancel it completely because that was when like restaurants were shut down, everything was shut down in New York. I don't know what it was like in California. It's a little warmer there, but in New York it was like a crisis. You know, we had a couple of shutdowns. They opened us up, they shut us back down again. So we canceled the show, but then in October of 2020, we had a show with restrictions. We had to follow certain guidelines, and it was, you know, obviously it wasn't as well attended as my last show because we couldn't have that much volume in the gallery. There could only be a certain amount of people in the gallery at once, but it was still one of the best shows we had, and art sold during that show. Like a good amount of art sold. It was pretty cool. It was called Art is the Cure. And the name came from that crisis that we were facing, the pandemic at the time. And that's when we started the curbside canvas thing, and some of the artists that were in that show collaborated with that. And one of the artists, some of the artists were featured in an article by Splash Mags that the journalist came to the show and interviewed some of the artists. And one of the artists named Larry Osan, really awesome photographer and mixed media artist, and he's done some street art too, and he has like good merch. He said that there was a need for doing shows during the pandemic, and that the show satisfied certain wants and needs that he had at the time that he couldn't express anywhere else, because even though it wasn't as well attended as some of like the most recent shows, because it was in the middle of the pandemic, he got his art to be seen in a time where everyone was going through so much doubt and pain and misery, and that really helped a lot of artists. And it was a common thread that the artists were talking about. And just to be able to express yourself and be seen during that time period where most people weren't being able to be seen. I mean, it was October of 2020. It was still like fairly new in the pandemic, you know. We had restrictions, but artists were seen, and it was a great show. And that was something that I was very proud of doing with me and my wife.
I almost feel like I was more seen during the pandemic because I left the workforce in 2019. And so I had already kind of been making the transition into working for myself. So when the pandemic hit, I was kind of already established in my new life. And so people couldn't go out. People were looking for comfort. People were looking for beauty. People were looking for hope. And people were at home in front of their computer screens, in front of their phones. And so people were on those. They were on the social platform. So I noticed that I had a huge upward spike in terms of traffic for visibility of my art. I had a huge spike in e-commerce sales, people buying prints, things like that, because people were being given little bits of money. And I think a lot of people in their depressive state are trying to navigate this thing that they were not familiar with. People wanted something to give them hope and inspiration. And I think people turned to art for that. Now, Vinnie, for you, what was real estate like during that period? Were you like not able to operate like a lot of other businesses? I mean, I wouldn't imagine a lot of people were looking for homes or trying to sell homes during that period.
Actually, that it shot up the market. There was an uncertainty that happened. We had to basically take new procedures, but then the values actually shot up because inventory went down.
So like the supply demand type of scenario?
Yeah. One, demand went up because they reduced rates thinking that would kind of help, but it actually made the demand higher, and the supply went down because people couldn't show their house, or old people didn't want to show the house. So it kind of like made the situation that we're in right now.
Yes, and quite a situation it is. I mean, I don't know about in New York, or certainly in Brazil and other parts of this country or other countries, but cost of living, and I talk about it a lot, but cost of living in California, it is ridiculous. It is tough. It is a very big challenge, I think, for a lot of artists. I know a lot of artists that are leaving San Diego, that are leaving California, moving to other states because it's very difficult to find sustainability here. And it's a difficulty that I've been having. I've been having a lot of trouble finding the sustainability that I've had in the past. So it's like I've had my success, and in more recent times, I've almost, I don't want to say have felt like a failure, but at times, yeah, I would say I did question if I was a failure or not, because it was like, oh, I was doing this before. Why can't I do this now? I'm just trying to keep a roof over my head. I'm trying to live a simple life. And one of the big things that I've had to kind of lean back into is the gallery shows, the visibility of my work outside of my home, having people see the work. And I think that that is why start shows is such a cool thing, because having your work seen as an artist is very important. Having your work seen on social media, tremendously beneficial, and it's a free platform. But Sophocles, I think you'll agree, seeing the work on Instagram or Facebook versus seeing it on a gallery wall, properly lit with people in attendance, there's a different type of magic to that experience. And it's an experience that a lot of artists are seeking.
That's for sure. And that's where we come in, because Instagram and Facebook are blessings, and some people don't view it that way. They're like, oh, the algorithm hurts my sales, it hurts my visibility.
I have a love-hate relationship with it.
Like they change it up, whatever. But actually the algorithm, I'm going to get into that for like just 1 second. The algorithm is meant to actually help you find the people that like your stuff. You just have to learn how it works, and it does change up. So it's always like a mystery, because I guess they don't want anyone to like find some like hack to it or whatever. I don't know the whole politics behind it, but when it comes to gallery shows, like there's nothing beats people seeing your art in person. And sometimes on Instagram, it's so fast. It's such a fast consuming platform, because there's like a scroll, that people don't always read captions, so they don't get like the full soul or story behind the work. Some people do read captions. If a post really inspires me or I like it, I'll read the caption for it. I'm not someone who just like looks at the post and just quickly taps like love and that's it. But when you have it in person, like you said, properly lit, professionally hung, and your composition of your pieces or piece, it depends on the gallery setting and how they hang the art in that gallery or that show, is there. You can hear guest feedback about the art. The guest can meet the artist can meet the guests, they can meet the collectors. They have a chance to actually tell their story to the collectors in person, and the collector can hear the person's voice in person. They can hear their story. The guest can ask questions. It's a different experience, and it's an experience I think every artist should taste in their lifetime and in their time. Even if they only show in a gallery once, I don't recommend just doing it once, because there's a book called Make More Money Selling Your Art. I recommend it to you, Michael, by Eric Rhodes. He is a plein air painter, and he owns a magazine called Plein Air Magazine. And he says that when you do an advertisement, whether it's on Instagram, billboard, magazine, whatever, if you're only doing it once, you might as well not do it at all, because the first time you do it, you might get some traction depending who you are or what are circumstances, but people need to see you over and over again for you to make a splash. No big artist like Picasso or Dali or Disney or anyone that was a big hit got big because they made a one-hit wonder, and that's it. One-hit wonders get forgotten, and that's unless maybe you're on YouTube forever, but you're not going to get as much traction as someone who's constantly putting themselves out there and leaves a legacy. So when it comes to showing your art in the gallery, it's good to do shows over and over.
Oh, we lost him.
About that, I had an alarm go off on my phone. I forgot about it. My bad. But anyway, there's a big power in showing your art more than once. And I'll use an example of an artist that I know very well. He's done many shows with us. The first time he did a show, he didn't really know what to show. He showed a mixture of things, mostly portraits of like different rappers and, pop culture people. And he didn't sell anything, and he was kind of bummed about it, right? But he didn't give up. His name is MJ Harridan. He's a very talented artist. He went to Pratt. He does lots of portraits and landscape stuff inspired by Bob Ross. And he did many more shows with us, and in the next 3, 4, 5 shows, he sold in like every single show. And like in the next 2-3 shows, I think he sold like 3 paintings in one show, 4 paintings in another show, 5 in another one. And in other shows, he sold prints and sometimes originals. He didn't give up. And that's the thing. Sometimes when you do your show for the first time, you show in a gallery the first time, you're nervous. You don't know what stories to tell about your art, about yourself, about who you are, your art as a person, your art as a entity. And you don't know how to fully like represent yourself. And the first time is sort of a learning experience. So if you give up and say, oh, well, you know, maybe this curator doesn't know what they're doing, or this curator doesn't help me enough, or, you know, it's a scam, you know, like I did the show, I didn't sell anything, or, you know, I hate when artists tell me, you know, like what you're doing is a scam, like this and that. We're providing a service just like any other business that provides a service, just like Vinnie, you know, he has a real estate company. I don't know everything about what you do, Vinnie. I'm sorry, because, you know, I'm still meeting you, but you're working real estate, right? So that's a service. Like Michael has art, and he's a full-time artist. He provides prints, he provides paintings. You know, he has a service. So it's a service. We literally put our limbs on the line, and we go all out for the artists that are in our shows in many ways. I'm not going to get into all of them, but, you know, we do collaborative posts on Instagram. We post new stories nonstop before the show. And we even tell the artists, even after the show, forever, if you tag us in a story, maybe I might not get to every story because I have a life too and I have children, you know, but if I see it at the time and I'm able to repost you, even after the show's over and you're not doing another show with us, I'll repost it if I can. You know, so you're part of the community now.
Didn't someone tell us?
I love you guys, and you guys as the community artists, you're my friends now. You know, like you're part of the family, and it's an art fam, and it's a community, and we all support each other, and we love each other, and we try to help each other get visibility. And the art community is a very tight-knit community. It's you know, I don't know how it is in California, but in New York, you know, it's a lot of the same people you see at the shows. And they try to help each other out for the most part. And most of the people are really kind, and the artists are very nice to each other. And it's a big love community, and we all really care. And since we're all have the same thing in common, we're artists, and we're trying to get our art out into the world and express ourselves and just, you know, show our art and get traction for our art. We all have the same struggle, and we respect that and we appreciate that. So that was a long-winded response. I'm sorry if I went off topic a little bit, but what I wanted to say is that, you know, art is so important, and those who make art, you know, it's a savior for them. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, Michael.
Vinnie, what were you going to say? You had a question, Vinnie?
No, I was going to say, I think it was probably 3 minutes into.
I'm not hearing you.
3 minutes into a script. But I think stories. I think someone talked about it on one of our calls before that.
I'm not hearing you.
Oh well. There's nothing we can do on our end. I mean, it's on his end.
Try messing with the mute button.
No, his speaker's good.
Guys, I'm not hearing you. I'm like on mute or something.
Okay, so he can't hear us, Michael. So I don't know what you're gonna do.
We'll send him a private chat.
So I just, I mean, send him a private chat. We can kind of figure that out. But no, what I was saying is that 25. I think someone said on here, there's only 25 stories at a time are allowed.
Yes, I think that is the case.
Yeah. So while we're trying to figure out what's going on,
resolve the technical issue, so I just send him a private chat.
Yeah, but I think it might be a sound. That's why we were having the echo before, and we put it on mute. I think it's a speaker.
Yeah, so we'll see if he can log out and log back in.
Yeah, see if he looks at the private chat. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a interesting thing. I mean, I was gonna try to ask him why he moved to Brazil, because I mean, living in Brazil, I would assume the cost of living is a lot cheaper out there than it is basically. I mean, living in New York. I mean, living in New York would seem to be a very expensive cost. You think it's expensive here in Southern California? Probably a lot more expensive out there.
Do you think so though? Because I always used to hear that New York was more expensive, but I had heard recently that we were the most expensive city in the country. But I mean, there's always biased statistics, so you got to always question what's factored.
Well, yeah, everything's trying to get your attention. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is trying to get your attention.
That is true. Yeah, that is definitely
right. I mean, like, because I've seen that too, where it's like the most expensive, and then you start looking into like the information of it all. And it's like, well, it's the most expensive based off of this, this, and this, and if you are blah 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 and this and that, right? So, I mean, I would think we're not factoring in basically, because I'm assuming a lot of those affordability things factor in the cost of what you make there, right? What the average person makes there, or the median household makes, right? So, but if you went strictly off the numbers, I would guess they'd be fairly high. Without
the national average I had read recently for what you needed to make nationally to just live comfortably as a single person was like almost $100,000. How many people out there make $100,000? I'm not saying that there aren't people out there that make $100,000, but do you think the average person makes $100,000 or close to $100,000?
I don't know. I mean, that'd be an interesting question. I'm gonna pull up Google right now. Okay, he's getting back on right now. I'll try to figure out if I can get that answer.
So his mute is on right now. It looks like.
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute him, but it's not allowing it. So I don't know if his speaker's not working.
Well, because it's it looks like it's unmute.
No, I know. I just.
How about now?
Okay,
yeah.
Now we can hear you.
Got you.
Okay, so I want to go back to a couple of the things that you were talking about, because you hit on a few really good points there. And one thing I want to say in your defense is that I think a lot of times artists that are lesser experienced have this expectation that they do a show or they work with a gallery or they have an opportunity, and it's like a guarantee of my work is going to sell. And that's not the case. You are being provided with a platform, with an opportunity. And oftentimes the opportunity is what you make of the opportunity. So when an artist has a show with you, even if it's a first show, a second show, a third show, you maximize the opportunity. You get good photos, you promote it, you tell people to come to the show. You use that for your resume to build your next opportunity. And as somebody that has been represented by multiple galleries and been doing this for decades, I had several shows with my main gallery because I'm constantly on rotation with my main gallery. But for the past couple shows, and each show runs about 10 weeks. So like for the past 4 or 5 months, I didn't really sell anything in my shows. And I started to get worried. I'm like, oh my God, is my gallery going to dump me because my work's not moving? And I did get some feedback that all of my galleries were having a little slow economic situation where not a lot of work was moving. And I figured that, you know what, life always comes in cycles. It'll come back around, but keep putting in the work, keep doing what you do, keep promoting, keep looking for new ways to build off of the opportunities you have. And then, so we just had work go up for another show about a month ago. And not long after, I sold one of my pieces in the show. So I sold a piece like a week or two ago for $3,000. So gallery takes 50% of that. But like, I was just happy for the movement. I'm like, okay, finally we got some momentum. And then they just picked up another piece today from my studio to replace that piece. Cause I was thinking, I'm like, oh, well, should I try to push another one of my pieces? Like if they move some of my work, yeah, like ask for the opportunity, ask to have another one of your pieces replace it because real estate's valuable. And I want to keep moving work. So I'm like, okay, so they picked up a piece this morning. And then right before we started the podcast, they sent me a text message, and I'm going to go ahead and read this, and said, just sold your beautiful accident set, which is 3 paintings. So that means that I just sold another 3 paintings today. Yeah. So, thank you. I appreciate that. And, it's one of those things where, like Sophocles said, this is a long game. You do this for the passion. You do this because you love it. But even artists that are successful, even people that do very well in this industry, we have our lulls too. We have our periods where we question ourselves. We're, even having done this for decades, I still have times where I feel like I'm fighting imposter syndrome and asking, like, am I good enough? Or are my best days behind me? Do I still have it? Do people not connect with my work? But I keep taking the baby steps and doing the work and trusting the process. And if you can keep going and not quit, I feel like that's such a big key in making it on this journey, because several weeks ago, I was at a point, I'm like, oh, nothing has moved in months. And then here I am now, like, sold a painting a week or two ago, just sold 3 more. And now I'm going to be bringing even more pieces to the gallery. So, you know, you can always find ways to generate the momentum when it's not there. And I do want to say, this is my advice for all you artists out there. When you do have a little momentum, don't get comfortable. Keep planting seeds and use that momentum to create more momentum, because there will be times that the pools seem to dry up. And I mean, I feel like that probably happens for you too in real estate. Vinnie, like maybe you have like a hot streak where you're like, yeah, you feel yourself, you feel kind of like a badass, like, hey, you know, I'm really doing it. But then you like hit these periods where you're like, oh shit, nothing's happening here. Like, do I not have it anymore? Did something go wrong?
They call me Maiden because I have the Maiden touch, Midas touch. No, sure. Yeah, we all have those. We all have those streaks. I mean, it's everything, right? You get deflated. I mean, probably same thing with running a marathon, right? I mean, you're like, fuck, dude. I mean, like I'm doing. Actually, you know, the funny thing, I think we've talked about this before. I ran a half marathon a couple years ago, right? This is shit, man. No, not a couple, maybe like 5 years ago now, right? I didn't train for it at all. It was a half marathon. I was like, God, come on, I got this. So I was like 7 miles into it, and I wasn't drinking water at all. So I was just like, I don't need water, man. I'm a man. I'm gonna run this thing, man. And I was like running past people, just thought I was like and I was in good shape. I was the shit.
As a runner, let me tell you what happened next, because I already know you hit the wall, didn't you?
Oh my God. I started, I was like the Tin Man. One leg started locking up on me, and then I'm getting farther and farther. I'm like, I gotta keep going, And then by the end of the race, I had both legs lock up on me, like I was like the Tin Man. So I was just walking like kind of, I don't know, bow-legged would be the right word. And I was just like, well, should have been not so cocky.
But you kept going, right?
Yeah. Oh, I finished. I wasn't gonna fucking not finish, but I got so cocky, and I just Yeah,
and you know, while we're on the topic of fitness, because a lot of times I do post fitness related stuff, and people may be like, well, you're an art person, why are you posting fitness stuff? But I feel like it ties together so much, because it's the mentality of sometimes, like, the thing I commonly hear from artists is, well, things aren't really working for me, or I'm going through troubles, I'm not feeling motivated or inspired. Well, there are a lot of times that I don't feel motivated or inspired. But when you don't feel motivated or inspired, sometimes you need to warm yourself up. So, like, maybe you don't feel like creating in the studio. I say, you know, do a little prep work, do some process-based stuff that is low stress, but so that you can warm up the creative muscles. Because if there's somebody out there that is going through the steps and putting in the work, and you just say, well, you know, I'm not really feeling it, so I'm not going to do it. It is so easy to just get into that state of not doing things. Or like Sophocles is saying, like, you don't sell anything in a show. Maybe you don't do shows for a while. Well, guess what? You're not going to sell work in a show if you don't have shows. So you need to keep plugging along. You need to keep doing stuff. That's not to say you can't have your mental health breaks, your down periods, times where you reevaluate. But if you're not putting in the work, you can't really blame somebody else. And when you have an opportunity, particularly in a gallery in New York, you capitalize on that opportunity, because that's a money opportunity right there.
Hey, before a question, stuff, please. So we were talking while you're off mic. The cost of living in New York, I would assume, is relatively expensive. I was finding numbers that the median household income in the United States is $74,000. It's $89,000 in San Diego, which I would thought it'd be more in New York, but it's $81,000 in New York. So it's actually, the income is lower in New York, but I would think the cost of living would be higher than San Diego in New York. Any kind of input or thoughts? Or
well, New York is a pretty pricey place to live in general, especially if you're living in Manhattan. I was living in Astoria, which is in Queens. I don't know if you guys are familiar with New York at all and the different boroughs, but
Queens, it was from that one movie, was The Nanny, right? Or a TV show back in the day. Queens? No, sorry.
Queens, which will
there was a, it might be past your time. There's a TV show. Fred Drescher, that's the one. The Nanny, Queens, Flushing, Queens. Sorry, okay.
Oh yeah.
That's nearby Astoria. Flushing is like, it's pretty close by. But
okay.
I haven't been to San Diego, so I don't know. But I have heard that the cost of living in California is probably the highest it is in the U.S. or
Oh, wow.
one of the highest in the world. And San Diego is supposed to be like a very like pricey place in California in general anyway, right? At least that's what I've heard. I follow a motivational speaker called Eric Thomas, the hip hop preacher.
Oh, yeah.
And he talks about how he lives in San Diego, and his friends are like, "You're going to live in California, you live in San Diego, the gas prices, the taxes, how are you going to pay for all that gas?" And he's just like, "Well, I just fill it up, and that's that," because he's doing pretty well for himself.
He does pretty well. He's one of the top speakers, so he's got the money for the gas.
But you know what's crazy with Eric Thomas? So I listen to a lot of motivational speakers too, and we're going off on a tangent right now. But Eric Thomas, the one video that I've watched so many times, and I've really never gotten to his other videos, is the one where he talks to that class about basically wanting it more than you can breathe, right?
That's his main one. That's his most viral one. Yeah.
That one goes crazy viral, right? Like that was
like 100 million views or something. I don't know exactly how much. It's a lot.
Does he have any other ones that have like hit that, not that level, but like got up there where it's really got viral?
Yeah, the thing about him is he posts so much. He posts like 3 or 5 videos a day, so he doesn't really need to have any other. And he has multiple platforms. He has Facebook, he has YouTube, he has Instagram. I don't know if he's on TikTok. He probably is, but I'm not sure. I don't use TikTok as much as Instagram, but he posts so much that he doesn't really need, and his reputation is so high now. He doesn't really need another one that goes 100 million because everyone, like, maybe not everyone, but lots of people know him now. So, you know what I'm saying?
Just from that video, that's the only thing I know him from. I mean, but I've watched it so many times. It was such a great video. I mean, he's Eric Thomas. I mean,
I just read his book at the end of the year, and he was talking about how he met with Les Brown and was talking about like what he should be charging for corporate opportunities. And so like, yeah, he charges like top dollar to go speak at for corporate clientele, things like that. And then he also does a lot of stuff for like teams in the NBA, NFL, stuff like that too. So he's set for life.
So, Les Brown, like, and please, so someone's on here, and if I'm incorrect in this, but I've had coaches and people trying to like, hey, I'm going to sell a book for you and things like that. But Les Brown, you can just pay him a fee and he'll like sponsor basically any of your stuff. Like he sponsors like so many different like coaches, books, things like that. You could co-write a book with Les Brown. I mean, he seems like he says yes to everything.
Does he? I wasn't aware of that.
I didn't know that, but I like Les a lot too. He's funny, so it's always a pleasure to listen to Les Brown. Yeah, and my man Eric Thomas is my favorite out of all of them. I also like Steve Harvey because he talks a lot about his motivational stuff. Mostly revolves around his connection to God and how people can really like boost their life by praying. And I'm very big. I'm spiritual. I'm very big on that. I don't really subscribe to any religion per se. I do like Christian values because they're pretty sound values in terms of living a positive, good life. But I don't really like subscribe to a religion. But Steve Harvey, whenever I'm like in the depression, and sometimes I go through depression, it's just a part of like my cycle. Like sometimes I'm feeling up and then sometimes I'm down, and it's hard to create when I'm feeling depressed. But I have that inner urge that says I want to draw. I feel like drawing right now. I want to draw, and I don't always draw every day. But I think you said this in one of your Michael, one of your sounds you're on Instagram, that the days that I create I feel better than the days that I don't, and I subscribe to that. Like because I'm a creative, drawing for me is like living and breathing. And when I'm not consistent with drawing, or at least doing something creative, like one of my shows, that's creative stuff too. I'm helping the artists, I'm teaching them. I've also been an art teacher for many years, so I didn't mention that before, but there it is. And when I'm not doing creative stuff, I feel like I'm drowning in a way. It's really strange. Like I feel like I'm like kind of in limbo or like in a twilight zone, and I'm not really like at my peak.
What age do you teach, or have you taught for art?
I've taught like pretty much like all ages, like except for like super young, like toddlers. Like I haven't really taught toddlers before, other than my daughter. I love teaching my daughter and drawing with my daughter, which is always a pleasure to me. She loves watercolors and she loves painting, and she loves getting dirty with the paints and coloring on her arms and legs and stuff. But I've taught like young kids, like in like 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. I've taught teenagers. I've taught adults in like paint and sips. I've taught mostly in after school programs and in creative centers in the different boroughs in NYC. mostly in Manhattan, Queens, and in the Bronx. I've taught.
What?
I'm sorry, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens.
Michael, you could probably throw in this too. What age group would you rather be teaching? Ones that are young kids that are probably don't have really a pattern of what they're going to draw, right? They're kind of like more to shape, but their skill set is probably really low compared to an older person that's more set in their ways. They have their kind of style already, but they have a better skill set, I guess.
I mean, me personally, I'm going to turn them upside down no matter what. So I'm kind of just want to work with somebody that has an open mind or somebody whose mind I can open up, because I'm going to completely change the way that they see the world. And, I think that that's one of the reasons why some people get turned off from art. Maybe they have a bad art teacher or a bad experience where somebody says, well, this is the way that you have to do it, or they criticize you. I know that I have seen and heard stories of art teachers, professors that would take paint, like black paint, and completely cover a student's painting and tell them that it's shit, or that they take thumbtacks and poke it through the paintings, and students would be crying, and it makes them hate art. And that is just not my approach. My approach is that I just want to unlock your potential, help you find your voice. I don't want you to be like me, to do things like me. I want to help you find yourself. So even as I share my stories, my messages, I don't want anybody to ever think like me. I just want to help you find yourself, because I am still on a journey to find myself. And like Sophocles mentioned mental health, like that's a battle that I fight. And so he was talking about my audios, my reels, and like I did a painting the other day that said, it was basically like a little heart, and it was all in gray. And then I've been working with my poetry lately, and it said, it's okay to feel gray. So I'm a big believer that if you're feeling depressed, you may need to take a day, you may need to catch your breath, but don't suffocate yourself. If you're feeling gray, maybe get back to doing some of that light stuff, some of that prep work, just warming up those muscles. And if you're feeling gray, make work that reflects that gray that you're feeling. It doesn't have to be aesthetically pleasing, but if you're honest in your work, there's beauty there. But I think what happens is too often you have a bad day, you have a bad experience, you step away. Once you step away for one day, this is the same thing for the gym too. You step away for one day, it gets easier to step away for a second day, and a third day, and a fourth day. And then you're gone for a week and a month. And then you've gotten another job or something like that. And then you got married, you had a kid. And yes, these things take time, and maybe these things become less of a priority, but you find every excuse not to go back to this thing that made you feel whole, this thing that made you feel like a complete person. You step away from your purpose and your calling. And so you have this feeling of being empty inside because you're missing this piece of yourself. And so that's why I encourage people to just, even if you have 5 minutes, doodle, explore. You don't have to do it this way, that way. You don't have to have all the expensive materials. There was a time where I was close to homeless, and all I could afford was a sketchbook and some black paint. And so I wrote poetry or painted poetry in the book, and it satiated my desire to create until I could get back to that place. And it goes back to what Sophocles was talking about with the pandemic. Sometimes we don't have all the resources, and that's not an excuse to stop. I mean, you can use that as an excuse to stop, but it means that you didn't really want it that bad. If you want it, you find a way, you find a creative solution. And yeah, maybe you're not doing all the things that you want to do, but there is always something that can be done. And you can climb your way out of that hell, and you can rise.
Totally agree with that. I've actually been going through a depression now for about a month or so, and I'm kind of climbing out of it now. I haven't really drawn too much during this depression. It hasn't been as bad as some of the other ones that I've had, but and I was like pretty solid. I don't know if you saw some of my farmboystory stories with like the gym for like a while, like for like 5-6 months, I was in the gym like every single day. And it was making like, I had a body that I've never really had before. Like even when I was doing MMA, I had bigger arms at the point, but my core wasn't as strong. I guess I was focusing more on core exercises during this period of my life. And like for this past month, like you said, it's a very key point, whether it's art or sports or working out or real estate or a job, whatever you want to call it. When you give yourself an excuse to take one day off, it spirals into 2. And then when you do it on a second day, it spirals into maybe a week or 5 days. And then it can spiral into a month. Like I was like so automatic. I was working out at some points for like an hour to 90 minutes, like a day in like one session. Sometimes I would even work out 2 times in a day. So I haven't been as consistent recently because I've been depressed. And when you're depressed, it's sometimes harder to fire those cylinders that make you so motivated to kick ass in the gym or, you know, really take your art to the next level. So I went and worked out recently, and it was only for 35 minutes. So it wasn't like as epic as like I was doing it in the past, you know. But at the end of the workout, I was unleashing ki or pneuma, what like the Greeks call it. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like internal energy, like kind of like in Dragon Ball. It's not that intense where you light on fire or anything, but I know how to do that because I've read books on how to do it. And I kind of combined it with visualization, like using Dragon Ball Z as an inspiration to imagine electricity flowing through my body and like flames shooting up through me. And when I did that, I felt like I was going to throw up. And that has never happened to me before, like ever. And I did a pretty intense workout before that. I was doing like pull-ups, and I was doing like handstand push-ups and like elevated planks and stuff, and some more other exercises. I felt like I was going to throw up, and I had to literally sit down like in the toilet next to the gym and just like catch my breath for a second so I don't throw up. And that's not how it was like when I was doing it like even a month ago. You know, I was more automatic. I took that time off, and I've been like kind of like laying around lately. And it's kind of hard to talk about depression and how you're not doing your best. And artists sometimes go through depression, and it's something that comes with creatives, you know. And maybe it has to do with the fact that art isn't always the most celebrated career, or it's not as well paid all the time, depending on, you know, what you put into it. Because what you put into it, you get out of it. But even people that put into a lot into it, sometimes it takes them several years to start to hit a stride, you know. So that's just part of it. But what I'm trying to say is, like, I'm countering on your point, just saying along on your point that when you take time off and you give yourself excuses are poison, because it can lead to you being very rusty, and it can lead to you feeling like I did, like you want to throw up if you haven't worked out in a long time, and you're not even doing as hard you're not even going as hard as you used to before. Or when it comes to your art, you don't even feel the same fluidity if you have your brush pen or whatever, right? And you're like painting, and you're in the zone because you've been doing it every day for like a year, and then suddenly a depression hits, or you have a bad day, or something happens in your life that causes you to not draw or paint for a while, or take photographs for a while. It feels almost foreign. When I was in that gym after not working out for like consistently for like a week or two, I was so glad to be there. I was like, I made it in today. You know how good that feels? But at the same time, the wanting to throw up after the gym felt terrible. But I did a story right after I wanted to throw up, and I was like, hey, you know, like at the end of the workout, I wanted to throw up, but you know, pain is temporary. And I learned this from Arnold Schwarzenegger. But the workout is legendary. The effort, the consistency is legendary. And I'm going to get back to that. I know I will. Right now, I might not be in my best state, but I will get back to that. And I just wanted to say that quickly, even though it took a little bit, to talk about your point about, you know, excuses are poison, and taking a day off is necessary once in a while, but it shouldn't become a habit.
Yeah, and on this artist journey, it does require, I mean, it depends, because there's such a spectrum for artists. There are so many different journeys to be had. There are artists that just pick up a brush and want to make something once. There's people that like to do it as a consistent hobby. There's people that do it as a profession. None of those are wrong. There's no wrong path. But to do it at a level, like, say you do want it to be a profession, it is, like you said, it is a hustle. I mean, I've been doing this for a long, long time. Went to art school. I make the sacrifices every day. I live a simple life. Despite that, last year, once my taxes were all done, my take home was $11,000. I had to survive last year off of $11,000. But you know, I was still in the plus. You know, I didn't take a loss. So yeah, I need to make sacrifices, but I'm willing to make the sacrifices for this dream because it's what I want. But I do want to let artists know out there, it is possible, but it is challenging. But nothing wonderful, nothing beautiful should ever be easy. That is what this is about. Like the beauty is in everything that I've had to sacrifice to get to where I am and to be able to live this dream. Like, I'm living the dream. So I have to recognize that the journey very much is the dream and it's not the destination. But it's a lot of work, and I have to look for and seek the opportunities. And that's why I want to get back to the idea of the art shows, because the art shows are something wonderful. Like maybe you are going through this depression, or maybe you're trying to get your work out there. And when you can get your work up on a wall in a space, in a city where a lot of people look at art, it can really help your confidence. It can really help you to move to the next level, and it can pull you out of that. Now, I want to be careful with how I say this, because I don't want to say that if you maybe don't get into a show that, you know, that you're of lesser value, your work's not good enough, because that's not the case. But, you know, push for these opportunities, because maybe it helps get you out of your comfort zone. Like me having my work in my show that's up right now, it got me out of my apartment for the first time in probably like a month, because I'm an indoor cat. I don't go out a lot. And it was good for me to get out. It was good for me to be around people, even if it was for a short period of time. It was good to remember what it was like to connect with people. And Sophocles mentioned something earlier where art shows are a great opportunity, in the sense that it's great to have your work up on a wall. But when you can build that deeper connection with the potential collector, I can't tell you how many times, because it has happened quite a few, where I have had an opening and I go and the gallery says, oh, this happened with one of my last shows, not too far back, like within the past 6 months. Somebody was looking at a piece in the window and the gallery said, hey, that person's checking out that piece. They're interested. You should go talk to them. Went and talked to the person for 5 minutes. Within 5 minutes of me having a conversation with this person, boom, $2,500 piece sold. So when you can share the story, when you can have the experience, when you can deeper that connection, that is what helps move you into this space of making this sustainable as an artist. So I want to be honest about all this, because I think a lot of people think like, oh, well, you know, once I work with the gallery, once I have it up on the wall, it's their job to sell it. Yes, in a sense, it is one of their responsibilities to try to do that, but it is not completely theirs. It is still your job to promote the show. Like all the marketing and stuff is not just on them. It is up to you too. When I have a show, it's my job to market and promote the shows that I have. It's my duty to go, like, I'm going to go into the gallery this weekend. I'm going to take pictures and videos of the pieces up there so I can create reels, so I can create content, so I can promote them. It's a relationship of balanced reciprocity that goes two ways. But if you take care of your gallery and your gallery takes care of you, you can do wonderful things. But you got to find those relationships that work for you and the opportunities that kind of work within the system that you want to operate as an artist.
I 100% agree with you. When you said that, you know, it's not the gallery's 100% responsibility to sell your art, because it is what you make out of it. You know, like the gallery has the platform, they have the wall space, they have the pedestals or the tables or however the gallery works, and they have clientele, right? But like you said, your gallerist said, yo, there's someone looking at your artwork. Why don't you go talk to them? And you could have been like, yeah, well, you know, I'm an introvert, so I don't feel like it. You wouldn't have sold that $2,500 piece, or you might have been much less likely to sell that $2,500 piece. And that's a good amount of money to make on a painting. You know, obviously, you know, paintings move for much more these days, but you know, it's still a good chunk of change. You know, it's a good amount of money. And like, you were sharing your experience and you were creating an experience for that guest, that collector, by talking to them, giving them a piece of your personality, telling them the backstory most likely of the piece, how you created it, or the creativity behind it, or the backstory. And one thing I learned from experience is that in the art of selling art, the art of selling art is the art of telling stories. And if you tell good stories about your art, you will be more likely to sell your art, especially if you have a good story behind your origin story of how you became an artist as well. Because the artist, there's a reason why so many authors, just bear with me for a second, have their picture on the front cover of the book. And that's because people like people, and people like people's stories. Stories have captivated people's interests and minds since the ancient times, whether it was scribbled on a cave wall, whether it was told on a fire by ancient Greeks or Romans or whatever culture, whether it was hieroglyphics in Egypt times. what now it's on Netflix and it's streaming. It's so easy to find stories everywhere. Books, movies, TV, streaming. It's like so easy. At the click of a button, you know, you have Amazon. That next book that you want to read is at your house in a second, whether it's Stephen King or Arnold Schwarzenegger's new book, Be Useful. It doesn't matter what the book is or what the movie is. Stories captivate people. So if you can master the story behind every single piece you have in a show or every show that you do and remember it by heart so that you can practice in a mirror, you can practice with a family or friend, you can record yourself doing it if you have no one to talk to, and you can see where you're saying or but or stuttering a little bit and fix your approach and make it more interesting and ask yourself, if I was listening to this guy's story, would I buy his art? Or would I keep listening for another 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 1 minute or even 30 seconds? Because sometimes people, you know, they don't have long attention spans these days. You have to captivate them quickly or they'll move. Otherwise, if it's a group show, they'll move to the next wall space for the next artist. So if you can tell good stories behind your art, you're more likely to sell it. And I know that by experience. I've sold my art, originals, prints, stickers, books in galleries. My wife has sold her art in galleries. Many of the artists that have done shows with us have shown their art in galleries, and I tell them all the same thing. I always tell them the same thing. It's stories. There's more to it than that. But being able to tell a good story behind the art and connect to the emotions of the collector with the stories behind your art will help you sell art. And I hope the artists that are watching this in the future, when it's recorded on YouTube, watch this far, because that's a gem. And if you don't know that, now you know it and you can apply it.
Well, Vinny, I have to imagine that it's the same for you in dealing with homes. Is when you can connect or hit on somebody's emotions and somebody feels that emotional connection, like that's what makes them want to buy a home or say, this is, I mean, 'cause it's your home. Like a home's a big deal. So I think that when you have to get almost hook them on that emotional level.
Yeah. Numbers make you think, emotions make you act.
And you also do, Vinny, a lot of like special events and things where you have these gatherings for your clients. And I think that like that's a huge part of your success. Like you're a very personable person, Vinny. I'm not a person that likes a lot of people, but I like you, Vinny. I think that you're a good person. I can see the good in you. And so if I feel that way as somebody that's an introvert that doesn't spend a lot of time around people, I can only imagine how other people feel, but I feel like that's probably a big thing that helps you with the success on your journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think Zig Ziglar says it best, right? And I know Sophocles, you're into like a lot of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, like you give enough people what they want in the world, you'll get what you want in the world, kind of thing.
Yeah,
right? So I think that's, I mean, and I think with the collaborations, I mean, you're helping other people out with the idea of maybe you'll get something out of them, maybe you won't, but you're doing right for them, and they're going to probably remember you when they come by a gallery or something like that. They're looking for another person. Like there's a guy I had on my other podcast that, I mean, he has to do it. I mean, he's a cool dude, Melody Cloud. So anyone listening, but and like he hit me up just randomly. He's like, "Hey, dude, they're looking for this journalist is looking for a realtor to like ask me questions to. If you want, take a look. I'll send it to you, and hopefully it works out for you." And I wasn't expecting anything off it, but it was one of those things. Like I was like, "Well, what can I bring value back to you, man?" And so I mean, he's not paying me. I'm gonna have him as a sponsor as on my other podcast, but I mean, just try to do right by people.
And I think that was the whole goal we had when we started the podcast too. And we were talking about that before we even went live today, is that this is something that we just do. One, it's an opportunity for me to kind of do something with you, which I absolutely love, but it's an opportunity to try to give back to artists. And, you know, we're not greedy in it. We don't get paid or anything like that. But our hope is that like people will want to share it, and then we can kind of just share the energy and grow together. And so Sophocles today shared a post before we went live, and it was like by far the most visible thing that we've ever had. And so I just let them know, like, you know, we really appreciate it, because that was the whole idea of this, is we just wanted a relationship of balanced reciprocity where we take care of the artists and the guests, and we just hope that they kind of see what we do and give back. It's like
well, you don't like, I mean, you're not saying, okay, it's tit for tat, like I'm gonna do this for you for having that. And it feels nice when you feel that the other person feels there's value in what you're doing, right? I mean, I think Sophocles he said it a couple times that thank you for having us on the platform. And again, I mean, you sense that he honestly, I mean, believes that. I mean, it could be bullshit, and I'm not, maybe it is, but you feel like that there is a honest person there that's like, hey, you know, I appreciate you doing this, and he did the post, he did an action that you can actually see and that kind of stuff. So it's nice. It wasn't necessary, but I think it's nice.
Yeah, it definitely helps with like feeling validated. And as an artist and as a starving artist, and let me clarify, because when I say starving artist, it's a term that I use to think of in a negative sense. Like you hear the term starving artist, most people have a negative connotation, but I see it as a positive thing because it means that I am starving, that I am hungry for my dream, that I will stay hungry no matter what. So I see it as a wonderful thing, but I also see it in the sense that when there is food on my table, I am going to take that food and I'm going to pass it down for another artist. And I hope that they pass it down and that they pass it down, because I don't believe that anybody has to be starving. I believe that we can feed each other. So I think that starving artists is a beautiful thing, but I think we can change the way that we see it. But I do have to say that, you know, there are times in life, admittedly, when we step back and kind of look at things and we look at self-care, where we may be overextending ourselves and we may be feeding people that don't feed us back. And I'm sure, Sophocles, you may have run into this with what you do, because you put a lot of your time, your energy out there to help other artists. And like you have your system and the way that it works. But like we were just saying, you know, it's just nice when we can all kind of work together and collaborate, as opposed to feeling like we're competing or that, people are hiding information and stuff. It's like, you know, we can put it all on the table. We can all eat, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. And part of what we do is we help artists not just show art, sell art. We teach them, we coach them for like 2 or 3 months before the show. I'm always like doing lives. And sometimes I do lives with the artists. That's a newer feature that we've been doing. Before that, we were doing lives with the sponsors. And then I thought, why don't we do a live with each artist that wants to do it for the show if they're part of one of the artists in the show? And they really enjoyed that a lot. So that's something that we're going to be continuing to do in the future, you know, because they had a chance to tell their story, to express themselves. And some of those artists that were on the live sold in the show, I guess, because they're promoting their art way before the show. Guests that are coming to the show are looking forward to every single live that's coming up, and they get to see the story of the artist, and that makes it more interesting to them, the pieces and the story of the artist. And maybe that's why they bought the piece. I can't for sure say why they bought the piece. I don't know. That's up to the artist to know. But you know, we coach them on marketing, presentation of their art for the show, selling their art, tips for selling, tips for talking to collectors, many aspects of how they can be successful and use different skills that I have learned from experience and from reading books to apply to shows, and not just our show. You know, I want them to go and do other people's shows too and take that knowledge that we gave them and, you know, succeed and keep going. I'm not trying to like gatekeep or hold them in like a crutch where they have to do our shows for the rest of their lives or anything like that. We can all help each other. And I really appreciate what you were saying about the fact that we can all eat, and there's room for food on everyone at the, you know, the Thanksgiving table or the arts giving table, to help each other and to lift each other up instead of trying to pull each other down or compete with each other. Because we're creatives, I've heard this term before, and Vinnie will probably appreciate it because he likes Zig Ziglar and E.T. and, you know, like probably other motivational speakers too, that when you're helping someone, it kind of causes like a circular effect. You know, you help one person, and that person, like you were saying, Michael, that person helps another person, and then that person helps another person. That's what we try to do. We've helped many artists get published in magazines, and they've been sponsors of our show, like CEOs of magazines, you know, blogs. You know, there's Stereotype Co., very cool guy, Dave Noodles, and then like there's Blue Pablo from Blue Calf. He's published people in his magazine that have been sponsors. He's been a sponsor in the show. There's Up Mag. They're a really cool magazine that like goes around to different states and countries, and it's mostly about street art, but they cover art shows too. He's published artists that have been in our shows, and we try to help artists really have a great start in the art world, but continue to be successful in the art world. And we use our platform to continue to help them in any way that we can. And like I said, after they've done a show with us, I'll continue to post them if they at least if they tag me in a story. you know, or sometimes even for posts, if they tag me as a collaborator in a post and they're, you know, the show's over already, but they've done a show with us. If the post is not inappropriate in some way, I'll be like, yeah, you know, that's awesome. Let me collaborate on this post, and it's on our page and it's on our feed and not just in the story. I'll do it, you know, as long as it's not inappropriate or, you know, at least if, you know, sometimes I have to post my own stuff first and then I'll get to them after, whatever, but I'll do it because I want to help them succeed. I really, truly care about artists as I am one, and I want to see them eat and be successful and grow and meet new artists and new people and make connections and be published and have massive success in their lives. Because I couldn't have been where I am now without my art teacher, Michael Samson, who was the man. I took one of his classes in 10th grade, and then I didn't take an art class at all until senior year. He let me into his AP art class to start doing. At the last second, I had a month to create a portfolio for the School of Visual Arts, which is one of the best art schools in the world. I didn't take an art class that year. He let me into AP art. He helped me like polish some of my pieces that I did in figure drawing class, advanced figure drawing class. And I got into SVA the first time I tried because of that teacher. And I'm still friends with him today. I met him when I was in New York, and I got to see some of his paintings up close. And I have a lot of appreciation for art teachers. I am one too, because they lift us up. Maybe not all of them. Like you said, there's some horror stories with like professors painting over with black paint and pricking with thumbtacks. That's garbage in my opinion. I don't know where they're going with that. Like that's stuff to lead people to hate art, and that's not what I want to do. That's the opposite of what I want to do. So I truly respect what you say, Michael, and Vinnie too. Like, and I appreciate being on this podcast. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you guys.
If people, and we're going to the end of the line right now, if people are looking to get, like, because you talked about giving insight of how to talk to galleries, what to do, things like that. I mean, do you have like a book? Is it a website? Is it just following your post? I mean, is it reaching out to you? I mean, like, what's the way of getting that kind of information?
Well, our start shows, there's no spaces or dots or anything. It's just start a car engine or start a book. Shows like SHOWS, like art shows with ST before it. If you follow that page and you scroll down, you can find posts that the whole live and then the recording of the live is on our post. The whole thing is about selling art or marketing art or promoting art. The whole video is about that, and it goes on for like an hour or like 35 or 45 minutes, and you can learn gems that I've learned from my whole experience as a curator. I've done more than 20 shows as a curator, maybe more than 30 now. I don't remember off the top of my head, and most of them have been in One Art Space Gallery, which is a prestigious Tribeca gallery off of Warren and Church Street that has exhibited Jack Kirby's art. Michael, you probably know who that is, right?
Not ringing a bell, but I'm coming off a traumatic brain injury, so sometimes I forget who I am.
Okay, so he co-created Marvel Comics characters. He drew them with Stan Lee.
Okay,
like the Avengers, Black Panther, X-Men, Fantastic Four. He's known as the king of comics in the comic book world, in American comics at least. And Al Diaz, who was Basquiat's partner in Samo. I'm sure you know Samo and Basquiat at least.
Yes.
You know, Hectad is a prolific. He's done one of our shows. Prolific muralist and painter and fine artist. They've shown a lot of international artists and famous artists, and we've done like 18 shows with them since 2018. And actually, the interesting thing is, I met my wife in the first ever show I did at that gallery. She was one of the featured artists. She came all the way from Brazil. So that's why I live in Brazil, because my wife is Brazilian. And we're living here because it's close to home to her parents. They help us out with our children. And it's actually a really amazing place to live. But I met her in that show. She came all the way from Brazil to do that show. And she was very gorgeous. She was very nice and sweet. And we hit it off after the show, and then we got married, and then we started a business a year after we met. And then we have now 2 kids, 2.5, almost 3-year-old daughter and a 4-month-old baby boy, both very cute. And what I'm just trying to say is that, like, you know, the the gallery world can be tough to navigate sometimes, but we try to make it not tough to navigate. And we have a central gallery that we mostly do artwork, like our program in, our platform. We've done shows at other spots too, other venues. But One Art Space is the king for us because they believe in our vision. And, you know, I've been to Chelsea galleries before. I'm sure you've heard of Chelsea in New York, where there's like lots of galleries. It's like a hub for galleries. And I asked, like, can I get my art in this gallery? How do I show my art? And they're like, yeah, we don't do that here. Go to the Lower East Side. And I was just like, like, what kind of attitude is that? Like, you don't even know who I am. Like, you don't know if my art is good or not. You didn't even look at it. Like, you didn't even tell me, like, I can email you with samples or something. Whatever. Maybe the approach that I used wasn't good or kosher with how they do things. I don't know, because I was a rookie at the time. I didn't know anything. But, you know, it gave me a fire in my belly. That made me think I want to provide a platform for artists where they can come to me or DM me. And I don't really look for art, like reach out to artists and say, do you want to be in my show? I make Instagram ads for the show, and then artists DM me and they apply. And I don't push my show on them. If they want to be in the show, they reach out to me. That's my style. So, you know, the ad tells them a little bit about the process and they learn more after they DM me. But my goal was to make a platform that's easy for artists to get into galleries, not difficult and impossible for artists to get to galleries, not to be a gatekeeper, but to be the gate opener and to help them have a great start in the art world. And that's my 2 cents. So, you know, that's what I wanted to say.
Well, and Sophocles, there's obviously a lot more that I think we could talk about. So you and I will definitely set up an Instagram live, and we'll do that together, and we can dive into some of the things we didn't get into, because I have a feeling you and I will be able to work together much more moving forward. But for anybody listening, we're also going to be doing a Blick gift card giveaway, $25 Blick gift card. So keep an eye out for that. We're going to work with Sophocles to figure out the best way to do that. But can you just real quick, Sophocles, give us your handles for social media and the sites that people can check out?
Sure. So our website is start, like START, shows, SHOWS, NYC, pretty straightforward.com. That's our website. You can find some information about how we started and about us and our mission there, and see some past images from past shows that we had. But the main platform we have is our Instagram. It's Start Shows. There's no NYC there. And it has like 6 years worth of shows and material and artists and their art on there. It's been a blessing to have this platform. We have a TikTok too, but to be honest with you, I still have to learn more about TikTok, and I don't really update it very often. I do want to update it more because it's a good platform and it's blowing up. So I like TikTok, but I have to learn more about it. That's the only thing. The handle for that is Start Shows, same as Instagram. A good homework assignment for artists that are reading this, we'll probably have our own ebook eventually soon too, and hopefully a written book as well, like a physical book. But read Make More Money Selling Your Art by Eric Rhodes. It talks about marketing, talks about selling your art, talking to collectors, an online presence. It's like a Bible for helping you sell your art in galleries and online. There's a whole chapter about art fairs and art galleries in there and how to sell at art fairs and art galleries. And I read that stuff. I read that book many times, and I always read it again, certain parts of it before a show to refresh my memory. And then I teach the artists that. And it's been a blessing and a great help. So that's a really good outside resource. That's not a Start Shows resource, but I battle tested it at shows, and it really works. And it's helped for our marketing for Start Shows as well. For our copy writing, for the Instagram ads, and just for marketing the shows. After I read that book, it's like things took off. So I really recommend to every artist, to you, Michael, as well. Some of the marketing stuff in it can work for non-artists as well. So it's a good book to check out in general. And that's where you can find us on socials and online.
Okay. And then join us on Instagram Live. Sophocles will work out when we're going to do that. But Vinnie, you want to send us off?
All right, guys. Well, please subscribe. Please share. Go in the show notes. Go find Sophocles. Oh, and then also, too, we are live usually most Thursdays, and our podcast usually drops most Mondays. So be aware of that. Subscribe us on both platforms. If you listen to the podcast, subscribe to us on the YouTube, and vice versa. Bye, guys.